Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm talking to Mark Clutter. Mark served with 3 RHA. He joined the army in 1990 and after attending basic training, served all his time with the Sidi Rezegh battery until he left in 1997. This is a 2-part episode, and in part 1, Mark tells us what it was like growing up, attending boarding school, his time in the army, and why he chose to leave. Later on in part 2, Mark goes over what it was like after he left the army and where he's ended up now. So look forward to that one. If you like this podcast or the previous ones, please consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Frankie'sPod. It just goes to help fund the software and the hosting. Right, hi, welcome back to the podcast. Today I've got Mark Clutter. Mark served with 3 RHA many years ago. He's going to tell us his story. Hiya Mark, how are you doing?
Frankie, I'm good. I'm really happy to be there and see you again.
Yeah, we're in person, by the way. He's in my house.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just so people don't think we're staring at each other over the internet again. Right, okay then, Mark. So basically, it's just 4 questions. Where'd you grow up? Why'd you join the army? What you did? Why'd you leave? And just carry on. You go on.
Simple questions, but I guess in my case, it's probably different to the traditional story. Where I grew up, I guess is where it starts. Like some people may know that I'm one of 3 cutters who went into the regiment. My dad being first, then my brother, then me. So that would make me a pads brat. That means I was born into the army. I was born in Hong Kong in 1973. Listen to one of your earlier podcasts. The guy who was Aidan.
Yeah.
When he was saying about where he moved around, it was like when I was listening to that, he says, "Oh, it was in Colchester," and I said, "That's where my brother was born." And then I said in my head, "Oh, he went to Hong Kong," and I was like, "That's where I was born." So yeah, I was born in Hong Kong, 1973, when my dad was serving in D Battery, and so I was brought up through the army. Where I grew up, that's another one where it's really different because, being a PAS brat, you move around a lot.
Yeah.
And like my dad, he went through a divorce when we were really young, and he got custody, which is, I think, back then, when was that? Early to mid 70s. A bloke and a soldier getting custody of kids, I think it's unheard of. It's probably
really unusual. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
especially in being serving. Yeah.
Yeah, serving. So, but he at the time had like a girlfriend, and they ended up like marrying, and she's my stepmom. So from parts I remember, we came back from Hong Kong. Like my origins, despite my really strong northeast accent, like my family origins is Sunderland.
Yeah.
So I am a Mackem. It's the accent that gives it away. Where's he from? He sounds like a Mackem. So I spent a bit of time, me and my brother spent a bit of time sort of in Sunderland living with other family members just whilst my dad was like sorting out his life. I do remember actually we had a stint in Bramcote. That's where the Junior Leaders Regiment wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we were there for a little stint. Then he got sent over to Germany. And I wonder, I don't actually know if it is the case, but I've always wondered, did they send him to Germany to help him out? Because we not long after getting there, me and my brother got sent to boarding school in England, which was at first it was horrific, and then I realised I could be a naughty boy and not get told off. Never get told off. So yeah. We, at a very young age, the 2 of us went to boarding school in the Malvern Hills. It was one of those, the army paid a percentage of the fee. Malvern Hills is an incredible place. It's just on the sort of Worcestershire border.
Yeah.
And it was up on the hill. So at first, it was a bit tragic. We got sort of like dropped off. We didn't really know it was a boarding school. I thought like, when are you coming back? And they went, no, you're gonna stay here. So the 2 of us were pretty upset that we were like dropped off at a school to live at. But for me anyway, I relished it. It took a while
Yeah.
to adjust. So
How old were you then?
how I remember it might be slightly wrong, but I think it was 5, 6 year old.
That's
Yeah,
it's,
maybe
it's, a,
6.
it's a big thing, that, though, isn't it?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I really enjoyed it there. After I settled in, I went to pre-prep. That wasn't. I was young enough to go to pre-prep, which wasn't really schooling of such. And this school, a lot of the people who went there, they were from like well-off families. It was really small.
Yeah.
And they spoke differently to what I spoke like. So the reason why
They
I've
spoke
got
proper.
such a unique accent is because at that boarding school, if I ever said things like "why I had to write out lines. I must not say "why I." It's like, so, but I really enjoyed it. That was mixed. Some really strange things happened there, like not what you imagine at a boarding school. And then actually, my brother, he wasn't enjoying it, and he ended up like leaving the school, and he went back to live at home in Germany. I just hung around a bit longer, and then as I sort of got older, I moved to a second boarding school, and that was a military boarding school, and it was just outside Purbright. It's called Gordon Boys School. Um, and I was there for a long old while. Yeah, military boarding school. It had like CCF.
Yeah.
It was the significance of that school will come up later on. And yeah, so I always knew I was going to go in the army. A lot of the kids, especially at that second boarding school, there was a lot more lads who were kids of soldiers.
Yeah.
So I had a lot more in common with a lot more people there. But those who weren't, again, were from wealthier background. So yeah, my childhood really wasn't at home. It was at boarding school from a young age, and the only time I'd really go home was like on the bigger holidays.
Yeah.
End of term holidays, like half terms. I would either go to my grandparents up in Sunderland, or at the second boarding school by chance. And like my stepmom, a family are really close to the school, so I'd stay there. So I don't know if you know Purbright, do you know Woking?
Yeah.
So in that area, so I had like some family there. So half terms, I'd go and stay with them. So not actually that much time at home. And then yeah, I knew I was going to go in the army, mostly because I didn't know anything else. I would if thinking back to it, if I was even asked now, like what did you want to do back then? It was one of two things. I either wanted to be an RAF police dog handler or a helicopter pilot. Turns out the problem is to be a helicopter pilot, you have to be able to pass some tests and exams and stuff. And I was a biff at school. There's no hiding that. I was really good out of the classroom, but
Yeah.
it got me in the classroom, and I hated it. Interestingly, I was listening to the podcast on the way up here, the last one that you did. What was his name? Sorry,
Chris Brown.
Chris. Yeah, Chris said something about the education system. I just briefly, 100% agree. It's a memory test.
Yeah.
And I'm not great at that, but I excelled out of the classroom. I was in the rugby team, the cricket team, the football team-ish. I wasn't a great football player, but I was quite good in goal. I did loads of athletics, and I was really quite an active kid.
How did being in boarding school affect your relationship with your father, with him being away and all that? Or was it a case of you just didn't know
him?
Or you didn't know, yeah.
Just didn't really know each other. At the time, I was quite bitter about it. Felt like sort of left on my own in school and not thought about. But as I've developed into a mature adult, questionable, I kind of understand some of the things that he was going through, and I fully understand that it's, it must be tough being a parent, so much so that I'm not. So yeah, it was quite a tough relationship for various different reasons, and it's been a strain on all of us really over the years. But yeah, so the time came upon us for me to decide to go in the army, and like everybody else, like I didn't go to the careers office, that they came to the school. Literally every single lad who was at that school whose dads were in the army took the army entrance tests. All the other civvy kids had no idea that that not one of the civvy kids was in the entrance test.
Yeah.
Turns out I did really well on that test because it's a different kind of test,
it's
isn't
different.
it? It's like more sort of worky stuff out.
It's a common sensey test.
Yeah. I think I've got a little bit. And I did all right. And I can't remember what the rating scale was, but I got all the way up to engineers or something. Actually, our CCF was sort of inspired by the engineers being where we were.
Yeah.
And the recruitment guy was like, "Oh yeah, do you wanna go in the engineers?" I was like, "No, I'm gonna go in the artillery." He was like, "You don't get a try." So he was trying to talk me out of it. I was like, "No, I'm pretty sure that my dad's gonna claim me to go into the artillery." So I ticked that box. I did inquire, "Can I go in the Army Air Corps as a helicopter pilot?" He just looked at me and was like, "No, son."
Why?
Right.
Me? 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 of these podcasts I've done, right? Where people say, I was going to join the Army Air Corps, but there was no spaces. So I joined the artillery instead.
I think back then the Army Air Corps was small, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's I thought it was be cool to fly a helicopter, but
I had posters of links on my wall as a kid. Like that. I really wanted to be in the air.
Just was fascinated by helicopters. Even to this day, it's a different. I've spent a lot of time with it when I was doing other stuff. So yeah, said to the recruitment officer who came in, I was like, "Look, can you find out? I'm pretty sure my dad's like claimed me to go to 3RHA." By this time, my brother's already in the regiment. So maybe by 2 years, he's 2 years older than me, so I think he was already in. And then I got my entrance date and I got my army number before I sat down to sit 1 GCSE. So I was like, should I revise? I was like, no, I've got a job. I don't need to revise. And yeah, needless to say, my exam results weren't great. I'll tell you what, even if I had a revised, they wouldn't have been great. So yeah, I joined 1990. And here's what's weird: a couple of people have said on your podcast that it's this culture shock, but for me there wasn't a culture shock. I knew what to expect. The recruitment people wanted me to go to junior leaders, and I'm like, I'm not going to junior leaders. Look at what I do here. It's a military boarding school. I can march, I can ball boots. I was in the band. I was a drummer in the band.
Yeah.
Played in front of the Queen. So I didn't want to go and do training for a year. Actually, yeah, we had like SAAE sort of 2-2 converted thing at school before I got them in the army. So I didn't want to go and drag it out for a year, but I was too young, and there was like some sort of special agreement that even at my age I could go to Woolwich. And it turns out that I was me and another guy had exactly the same birthdays, and we were the 2 youngest people at that time to go through Woolwich. So yeah, 1990, I literally went from the gates of my boarding school. I stayed at my nan's nearby for one night, and then got put on a train to go to Woolwich, and did my basic training in Woolwich, which is where the fun and games began.
So that would have been quite hard, really, because I mean, you were going there as a 16-year-old. Everyone else in training had been, what, 20, 19, 20?
I thought they were men.
Well, they were.
That's a man.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure if my voice had dropped yet. My chest certainly hadn't, and my tackle had definitely not. And then of course the instructing staff as well were, full screws sergeants, aren't they? It's like this is a man environment. Yeah, it was. That I guess was the thing that was the challenge or the eye opener was. Oh no, this is inverted commas like the adult world.
You got to grow up really quickly.
Yeah, but I had this like hidden advantage of like I didn't have to struggle so much with how do I march and how do I do bed blocks, and they're shouting at me because that kind of stuff happened in my boarding school. That was part of the culture there, So that wasn't the challengey bit for me. The challengey bit for me was these are men folk.
Yeah.
Like I say, like he's 18 and he's got a full beard, So that was a challenge, and then there was this other challenge of like people knew who I was, and that's where that challenge started really from the get go. When I walked in to one of the blocks, somebody just shouted out, "Which one of you like is his cutter?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's me." And he was like, "Your dad sent me, and I don't want to be here."
Oh fuck!
So he was a full screw from Germany.
Yeah,
that's good money, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he was sent to the training regiment. He says, whether or not some of these things be true. So I got some. That was like I from this point on, I know that I'm gonna be known for who my dad was and my brother as well. So yeah, that, to be honest,
And whether that's a good or a bad thing.
50-50.
Yeah.
Well, no, probably a bit. It was mostly good, but there was some bad. I'll talk about that later. So yeah, there was that. An example of it, so that was the first example, knowing that. And then another example, there was somebody who was one of the instructors who was in 3RHA in J Battery, Mal Bates.
Yeah.
So he was one of the instructors there. I'm sure he was, Mal. Yeah, Mal was one of the instructors. Mal, if you just remind me, because I forgot. I'm sure he was one of the instructors who knew I was going to 3RHA. And there was another instructor who was first RHA, Tex Brown, I think his name was, full screw. He was there. So, and then the next thing that happened with regards to knowing this is going to happen a lot is, so when we first turn up basic training, they show you around the whole facility, and they showed the headquarter building. Did you go through Woolwich?
No, I was junior leaders. I've been to Woolwich.
Okay, well, so the HQ was on the first left-hand side. It was a shiny mirrored building at the time, and we stood outside there, and we were told, if you ever go in there, something's really, really wrong.
Yeah, I've swept about the side of there a couple of times. The first time I went AWOL, I did 16 days in Woolwich, Nick, waiting to fly back to Germany.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
You've been around a few Nicks, haven't you?
So I like to test them.
Do you get feedback forms?
Yeah.
So one afternoon, I don't know when it was, you've got to go and see the BSM. And do you know when you're ever told that, as you go in there, you think about all of the things that you've done wrong and convince yourself you've done something wrong.
Yeah.
I'm a 16-year-old in basic training. I haven't got time to do anything wrong. Why do I need to go up here? And I thought it was going to be something like really bad news. I thought I was getting kicked out, and because I'm a real positive person, I thought of the negatives.
Yeah.
So I was like bricking it, mooching around the corridors, and like getting to the BSM's office. It's close the door, and he says, "Where's your blonde hair, son?" I'm like, I don't know. They've cut it off. Says, "You don't know who I am, do you?" I was like, "I'm sorry. Well, you're the BSM, like." And he was like, "No." So when my dad was in Bramcote, he was an instructor at junior leaders, he was our next door neighbour, and apparently I took his dog for a walk a lot.
Right.
But I'm like, yeah, cool. So a lot of people remember me. I don't really remember or know a lot of people. And I was like, oh yeah, that's great. He says, anyway, now I'm gonna tell you to get out of my office, but don't worry, I'll shout at you. But I just wanted to see if you're all right. And all that. So yeah, I'm fine. He says, right, so open the door. I'm going to shout at you now. I open the door. Get out of my office. All right. So yeah, even through basic training, there was a lot of that sort of people who knew your dad. But there was one guy. It was by a freak occurrence, I guess. No, it wasn't a freak occurrence because he was there. So my dad's best mate is called Topper Brown. He was in first RHA, and he was a really, really close friend of the family, and from like a really close friend of the family. Used to look after me and my brother really well. So we got asked if anybody wanted to do like a weekend duty, like a dick-in, and it was to do like waitering for some sort of artillery regiment's reunion, like past and present member association. And we're encouraged for the first time saying, look, put your hand up for this because you'll get extra duty pay. Plus, what they do is they put loads of money in the ring, in the pot, and at the end of it, you'll get some really hefty tips. And we'll let you go to the bar before, and you can have a quick pint, and then you go and do that. So we do encourage you doing it, and you'll get to meet loads of old blokes. So I put my hand for it, and so whilst I was doing that, I see this Topper Brown fella, and it was just like, oh man, I tapped him on the shoulder and said, right, and he said, fucking hell, and he was the RQ. So he's like, coming, are you all right? And I was like, no, I'm getting a bit of a hard time for who I am, and it was like, just stick with it, don't worry. So that was really helpful, him being there just by chance. I didn't know. If I hadn't volunteered for that waitering job, I don't think we would have bumped into each other. So that was basic training. Although there was one thing that happened at basic training, that was a sudden realization, this is it. And so we started doing guard duties. I think that was in phase 2, actually. I don't think we did it Yeah, we started doing guard duty, but we were out with a pickaxe handle.
Yeah.
And we had the radio and a pickaxe handle because we weren't trained or signed off. We hadn't done an APWT yet. And there was a shooting, a drive-by shooting. Somebody was targeted. And so I've been a Pasbrat, grew up in Germany a lot with the whole IRA thing. You know, I was sent out to go and check the car for bombs because they didn't think they would detonate if a kid was checking a car, but they did one year.
Yeah.
And so I was accustomed to it, but all the other lads weren't, and all told to go back to the guard room. And it was reported as a drive-by shooting, but the guard commanders and all that were like, we just think it's locals with an air rifle. The lad who reported it said a van drove by slowly, opened the side door and pulled out a weapon, and they tried to get a description of what the weapon was. Based on his description, the guard commander was convinced it was an air rifle. You know, it's got a real small nose, isn't it? But this young lad was all upset about it and was crying. And he got put in the square and got basted for crying. It's like, all right. And it was that, like, look, you're joining the army, you got to understand the fact that you are going to get trained to potentially go overseas or whatever and fight, and you've definitely got to know about Northern Ireland and your security. We can't have people crying, so he got basted. So I was like, oh yeah, we've got to take this a bit more seriously. So
Yeah.
So yeah, that was basic training. I found it really quite straightforward. Yeah, I think it's a standard basic training other than that. And then after that, I went through HA to J Battery in Colchester. And in honesty, I was only in the army like 7 years.
Was your dad still in third then?
No, he was in 4-9. He was RSM of 4-9 regiment. I asked him years later, like, why didn't you stay? Because it would have been the three of us. And like his answer was right. He didn't want it to be all three of us there. He was strongly encouraged to make that happen, and for our own sake, he was like, no, I'm not playing that game. It's not fair for them. So he ended up going to 4-9 as RSM.
Well, I mean, if he'd have stayed in the regiment, I mean, people would have just went, yeah, you're only getting that because you're only getting that and that because of your dad type of thing.
Yeah, but I got that anyway.
Yeah.
I would. Yeah, the army was real hot. So like real close. Like he was really close with Freddie Viggers.
Yeah.
And like our family was really close with Freddie Viggers, and so Freddie Viggers was Dad's troop commander. Went on to be my CO. I think it was your CO as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was first and foremost like a family friend. I could call him Freddie. You know, no, I didn't around people, but when I'll tell you a story about when I met him in Bosnia. So yeah, he didn't want that to happen. In fact, my mum and my dad, they definitely wanted to come back to the UK. It's quite tough for my mum to be in Germany all those years, and they said he was going to get posted back to the UK. They got all packed up and ready to go, and had our dog put down. And then the army did the classic army thing: you're not going back to the UK. You're going to RSM 4-9. Do you know why he went there? I'm not going to talk about it on there. I'll tell you why he went there. So yeah, so I joined the J Battery just at a time where Northern Ireland was on the cards, and I was too young to go to Northern Ireland, and I kept getting asked, how old are you? I kept saying like, well, I think, man, I must have not even been 17 when I got to the battery. Of the BSM at the time, the greatest man ever, Al Durrant, was the BSM, and kept walking past me going, how old are you? And I had to check, and he's, when you're 17, and it'd storm off like shaking his head, and I didn't get why. And then he finally said like, look, I'm sorry, you're not going to come to Northern Ireland, you're too young, we're going to send you to Belize instead, you're going to go to Belize with D Battery. I was like, oh, cool. I went off to have a look, find out where the hell's Belize. Didn't have a clue where Belize was, did I? So yeah, that was my like first tour joining the regiment. It's brilliant. It was a bit weird because I went with D Battery, and I only just arrived really at the regiment, and the way that did you do Belize?
No, that's one of the places I never got to go to.
There was a troop like up north, troop down south, and me and my brother were separated. He was down south, I was up north. And so up north, Holdfast Camp, we had a J battery gun, a TA gun, and a D battery gun. I think there's only 3 guns at each of the troops.
Right.
So that was it was an unusual setup, but it kind of worked because there was quite a few people who didn't know each other. And the J battery gun, I just got to know those fellas. That was quite handy, and we were a really good gun. Some really good lads who were out there, and it was a great tour. Especially as just joined as a 16-year-old, that's when found out what it means to be a drinker. Like,
yeah,
I
mean, it's unusual being that young in a unit. It is.
It's ridiculous. So I mentioned earlier, like just yesterday, my wife and I was cleaning the house out, and we pulled out loads of photos for when we first met years ago. 20 years I've been married. Well, with my wife. So I went and pulled out some photos of the army, and there's a photograph of me. I had my 18th birthday out there, and there was an incident on the camp when I was there at a young age. Somebody sadly died, and I show the photograph to my wife and say, so literally 50 meters away from that photograph, there was a lad who died, and I'm 18, and it's the first real major incident really that happened in a short time that will affect you. Maybe at the time it was tragic what happened, but it was one of the first things that happened, and then there's all sorts of different things that happened after that sort of catches up at you later in life. So I had a good tour there, jungle. That if you've ever done a blaze tour, like working in the jungle is a flipping nightmare. It stays with you forever. Given a choice, I've been in a desert 1,000 times before one day in the jungle.
Yeah, I mean the only time I've done jungle stuff was in Jamaica.
We went there together.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
And it's not.
That
nice.
Was not done right either.
No.
That
was just a piss up for 6 weeks.
So yeah,
that's called exercise red stripe.
That's what it was. Yeah, named after a beer. Well done. That took all day to come up with that name, didn't it? So coming back from Belize was actually quite tough to then reassimilate back into J Barry. Is that the right word? Reassimilate?
Yeah.
It sounds quite robotic.
Like Star Trek.
I didn't really know anyone in the battery because I can't remember how long it was before me getting to the regiment, then going to be attached to D battery to go 6 months and then come back. But I think it was not long after that. Well, it could have been. So it was quite difficult to get to know all these people. So it felt like restarting. I don't know what comes next, but like you mentioned there, like some of the other tours that I did, I don't know if they're tours, but in a short time in Belize, Canada, Cyprus, Jamaica, the Oman, and did an operational tour of Northern Ireland and Bosnia.
Yeah.
And in amongst all of that is, we'd do like summer camp, wouldn't we? Summer camp. Yeah, it was where we'd all go on holiday. We'd go down Salisbury Plain. And I think we were down there for a good 2-3 weeks.
Well, we had that. We converted to the AS90, didn't we?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It was like a 6-week one.
Yeah, that was a long one.
Horrendous, yeah.
Put me in hospital, didn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, in a short time, real busy. Like one of the other podcasts as well. I forget the names, mate. Sorry. It just back then. So this was pre-Gulf and Afghan, really.
Yeah.
People were just kept busy.
Yeah.
There were loads of places to go, and I do remember back then there was a real bit of problem with people going AWOL just because of the turnover for like the tours, etc. was really quite high. So I knew I was going to Bosnia. We were told Jamaica. If you go to Jamaica, you're not going to Bosnia. So we were gonna we were going to get attached to the radar troop or other regiments who were going to go. A small number of us were going to get attached to the radar troop or different regiments.
Yeah.
And we were told, if you go to Jamaica, then you're not getting attached. But then we wanted to go to do that stuff.
Yeah, like I've said on a previous podcast, one I've recorded hasn't come out yet. That was the only tour that I would quite happily want to go on because
I wanted to go.
So we needed to.
So we were told we're going to Jamaica. In the morning when we paraded, like I had said to my girlfriend at the time, if I go to Jamaica, we're not going to Bosnia. And she was like, right. So the morning we were parading to fly out to Jamaica, we were in the gun park, and somebody shouted our names and went upstairs and said, "When we come back, you're going to get attached to radar troop. You're going to go to Bosnia." That's the morning of the flight to Jamaica. When I told my missus at the time, I ain't going. So then when we flew out, I'm sure we flew out Civi. We flew out, or did we fly out Civi? Or we flew back Civi? Yeah. So at the airport, I called my girlfriend and said, "Oh, they just let me know that I'm going to go to Bosnia." She was raging. And I, like, deep down inside, I'm like, that's the way it is, mate.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, cool. So yeah, when we came back from Jamaica, I was attached to the radar troop, who I knew nothing about them. I didn't have a clue who they were, what they're doing. I remember they turned up once, and it was when we had AS90. These things would turn up, and I'd be like, who are they? And people would say, oh, that's radar troop, that's Cymbeline, mortar locating type thing. I was like, I don't get it. And I didn't even get it up to the point where I failed my Cymbeline course. Still didn't get it. And the sergeant major at the time was like, "You really need to pass this course, or you won't go." I was like, "I want to go." He said, "Oh, don't worry, you'll go. We'll just get you on the course when you're out there." So yeah, I went out to Bosnia. So, and that was a great tour.
So you were in Sarajevo there, weren't you?
Yeah. So yeah, that was a real eye-opening tour. So the main reason why I wanted to go is I saw all that was happening on the news. It was, back then it was being described as, worst events or atrocities since the Second World War, and the way that they were like treating people. So I wanted to go to think that I could try and help. I wasn't one of the first out there. There'd been a few tours before I went out there.
Yeah, a few of the lads had been out. It's like attached to the units.
Yeah, and then the other thing, maybe somewhat naive, I wanted to do a UN tour, feeling that I was going to help people out. I just had this vision or image of a blue beret going to countries where you can help, and the absolute opposite was true. And even before I went, before I was told I was going, seeing the news and the UN all getting together and just talking stuff, I'm watching these images of, emaciated Serbs or Bosnians or whatever, being held in camps, and I'm like, is this the best we can do? Just talk about it. Let's get out there and let's help out. And so being told you're going to go, I was pretty chuffed. By then, I had done a Northern Ireland tour by then, yeah. So I felt like it was going to be a difficult tour. I knew that, but when I got told I was going, and when I went, I was kind of excited to go in a strange way. Is excited the right word?
No, I know what you mean.
I was apprehensive as well, let's be honest.
I mean, we got told, because I was, as you know, we were out there at the same time, where I was attached to 19 Reg. We come back from Jamaica on a Thursday night, and on the Friday morning we were doing weapon cleaning, and I was walking back from the hangar to go towards the armory to take me weapon back, and the BC pulled up next to me and said, "Where are you going with that?" I said, "Going to the armory." And he went, "Take it to the guard room. You're off to Bosnia on Monday morning." I went, "Fucking what?"
Right.
We'd been warned off, but they said it would probably not happen. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And next thing I know, I'm going home, saying to the missus at the time, "Yeah, I just won't even bother. I didn't even wash my kit, from Jamaica." And they said, "You've got to hand your junglies in and all that." So I rush home, grab it. They hadn't been washed. And I remember walking up the Q store saying, "I've got to give you these." I can't remember who the Q was at the time, but he was like, "I'm not fucking taking them, and they're stinking." I said, "I haven't got time to wash them. I'm going to Bosnia on Monday morning. I've got to go and pack. I'm gone." And he was like, he started giving us a rifting, and I was shaking because I was annoyed at him having a go at me, and plus I was thinking, "What the fuck? I'm going to Bosnia on Monday morning," and it wasn't because he was ready to really rip into me because of the state of this stuff. It was minging, and he stopped because the BC walked in the store behind me and just looked at the queue and just went, "Shut the fuck up, take his kit, take it home and wash it." And I just smiled at him and marched out.
So it's a common theme of that time. Yeah. Like I said earlier, it's like it was a busy time for the army. I'm not talking like operational, but that plus Northern Ireland, and then that it was a high turnover of either exercise or something. Like I said, a lot of people left, and it was that you're going next week, we need somebody next week type thing. Yeah. So no notice, and that's like for I was a singly. That's reasonable. I lived in the block, and if I was told I'm going somewhere, I'm like, yeah, good, because it means I'm not here. But the army, sadly, overlooks families, and it's that
Mm.
kind of thing is a pressure on families. Having been brought up in it, I saw it a lot. Divorce rates are really, really high. AWOL, but a load of people were going AWOL during those times because there's just too much going on, and at short notice getting messed around, which is like,
There was a lot of short notice stuff going on,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, Bosnia was for me like the beginning of the end, really. I didn't like so when I went out there, we we landed. We sort of moved up to Igman is where you were, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But we drove um, we drove up through Mostar, and we were in coaches.
Yeah.
And it's like when I went through Mostar, real flat plateau, but surrounded by mountains. Absolutely. Like I woke up, I was sleeping, I woke up in Mostar, and I was like, oh Jesus, look at the state of this place. And
Yeah.
it was then quite a difficult journey up to Igman, the top of Igman. We're going to get met by some French. You might want to cut that out. I can't even say the word French.
You said it quite well.
It's worse than any swear word. So they were going to, because it was armored vehicles, they were going to take us down into Sarajevo, where we were staying. I think it was called TV2 or something.
Yeah,
like
TV2 building, yeah.
yeah. And so that's where the troop was, and we were told, like everything that you're told in the army is true. If you arrive and it's nighttime, you won't go out to your locations to meet the lads who are the advance party. And sure enough, as soon as I walked in through the front door, they're like, don't get changed, going out to your position. And it's dark, right? So I went out to the position, met the radar, the rest of the lads on radar, and Geordie Keller was his name. He's like, let me just give you a safety brief. And he put a spade up in the air and he got hit by a sniper's bullet. He said, don't go any higher than that. So, all right, cool. And it's pitch black, so that was my first night in Sarajevo.
Yeah.
Like, holy crap. It's strange, isn't it? And a movie called Welcome to Sarajevo.
Yeah.
It was like that. Of course, the next morning, saw where I was, we were by the airport. I look around and it was like, all right, this is it now. And it was, yeah, seeing the state of the place was really, really bad. Like, of what people do to each other. It was real complicated, wasn't it? Because it wasn't a traditional war. It was like multiple parties, a three-way party type thing.
It was mental.
Yeah. And then,
I mean, Sarajevo itself was weird. When we come down to visit yous,
yeah.
they turned around and went, oh, it's been quiet this week. We'll get you an interpreter and go downtown. So we did.
Yeah.
And we just got dropped off. And we were walking
Yeah,
round.
could, yeah.
And then we walked back towards TV2 and somebody said, oh, there's a Danish camp up just up there. And they've got a big, massive PX. So me, Fitzy and Daz Amel said, all right, we'll have a walk up there to go and see this Danish camp.
Right? Yeah.
And it was fucking miles away.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, I could get attacked and shot. Ah, fuck it. They've got cheap facts up
It
there.
was everywhere.
Yeah.
It was really quite surreal, like, bombs going off like nearby, or like incoming, not bombs going off, but and being sniped at was just like the norm. So the first time it like was really serious for me, I'd been there for about a week. I said there that I started off at the airport. I think we did 2 weeks at each location. So 2 weeks at the airport, 2 weeks at the fort, and then 2 weeks back in TV2. That was kind of like your downtime, really. Just clean up and then go back out. So I got put on duty at the main gate, the blown out door.
Yeah.
And so out in front of us was a big square, and then there was a road that brought into that sort of complex. But there was a Bosnian checkpoint, police or military checkpoint, that we'd have to go through every day to either come in or leave. And they were a pain in the arse. They used to get us out all the time and check IDs, no matter the fact that we're the British Army, mate. And so yeah, I was doing this guard duty. Like I say, radar troop, that was their second tour. They'd been there before, as all of the troops, so they were they knew the crack, but hadn't shared that with us, and very well. So yeah, I was on the gate and I was like, oh, I'm going to go off for a patrol, which was, about the size of 2 football pitches, a yard out the front of us where all the vehicles were. So it's just to make sure nobody's nicking anything from the vehicles. And I walked to the bottom. I hit the road and I saw the Serb checkpoint and gave them a wave. And they're all on the source, aren't they? And they didn't wave. And I thought, right, I'll just walk the road all the way around. And when I turned my back, I heard a weapon cock. And I was like, I just heard a weapon cock. And then he started shooting at me. And I'm like, I've got to run. I've got to run. And I swear down, Frankie, this is true. The theme tune to the A-Team came in my head. Do you know why? So if you ever watch the A-Team, nobody ever got killed in the A-Team, did they?
No.
But like one of the dramatic effects of the show was shooting, and it was always shown around people's feet with bullets going off around them, and then I think one of them would jump on a trampoline and go up into the air. And so as I'm running, there's bullets going off around my feet, and the theme tune of the A-Team came into my head, and I turned around the corner. I got back to the front camp, and the TSM was there. I forget his name. That says, it's like I just run a marathon, hanging out, like, So what's the matter? I went, that checkpoint down there just shot at me. I went, yeah, they'll do that here. Try not to make it easy for them. So I was checking vehicles. So yeah, after that, it just went non-stop of that. There's loads of other sort of small little stories that way. Oh yes. So yeah, it was a big eye opener. Seeing the state of Sarajevo, but then the thing that's incredible that I was really taken back by was, that a lot of the locals who didn't leave, who did like probably unable to for whatever reason, or had decided to stay for whatever reason, just carry on with life the best they can. We one of our 432s broke down on Sniper's Alley, and we all jumped out. I broke it. I broke the 432, but we all got out to tire kick it. Like British builders. It needs 8 of us to have a look what's wrong with it. And I'm looking around, and there's people in calves, but they'd made shelters. So they
on the sandbags outside.
Yeah. And I was like, man, that's amazing. And in between roads, they're dotting around, and one of the locals just started shouting over to us, "You're being sniped at, by the way." And sure enough, like pinging off the truck, and it just felt like a really bizarre situation. But seeing the locals kind of cope with it, when there was this one particular building looked like a big rocket, just absolutely pounded.
Yeah.
I think it was across the way from where the place got absolutely, it was being pounded, and these people were trying their best to to live.
It was a strange. I mean, it was a strange place. I mean, because I was attached to that medical section, and if we had to take someone down to the dentist, the only dentist was in the French camp, like just down the road from using a cross. So the first time we threw him in the back, and me and Fitzy drove a Land Rover ambulance, the 127s, from Igman into Sarajevo. So we drove down through the Bosnian checkpoint, through into the Serb-held bit. They were arseholes.
Well, no.
Back into, so you'd come out the Bosnian bit into the Serb bit, and then there was another checkpoint at the end of the Serb bit. So they'd check you on that side, and they were a pain in the arse. And then off we went into Sarajevo, and it was the first time we'd been into Sarajevo, and we were like, oh, look at the, and looking around and thinking, Jesus Christ. And we got to this camp, drove in, and we'd already changed to multinational brigade then, so we didn't have the UN berries. And we went into this camp, and the French were like looking at us because they were all in blue berries at UN, and they were like looking at us like, what the fuck are these like? So we sent this kid off to the dentist, and these French officers come over to me and Fitch, and I said, who are you? What do you mean? What, with the berry and all? Where? Up on the hill. And they must have thought we were special forces. They took us to the officers' mess for lunch.
Really?
A glass of wine and everything. And as we come out, me and Fitch like, look, what the fuck's going on here? This kid turns back up and says, right, get in the back. And he's like, he was laughing at us. Don't just be in the officers' mess for lunch. That's right, they had spaghetti. I think it was the first fresh food we had in ages as well. But it was talking, like, we're waiting for this kid coming back, and we were talking to these French guys, and they turned and said, oh, which way did you come in? We said, oh, just straight down that road. He went, you're not supposed to drive down there. That's Sniper's Alley. I said, it's the only way fucking in and out.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, we drove in there like sightseeing. When we drove out of Sarajevo, it was a V8 Land Rover, fuck me, it moved.
They did,
We were
you
just
know.
wrong.
Yeah.
We were because we were driving in just like normal traffic, thinking yeah, and then seeing red lights and stuff. We were stopping at them, and the locals were fucking nowhere. And we were like, "What's going on?" I'll
Make sure
tell
you
you what.
indicate.
Yeah, it wasn't like that on the way back.
So
Yeah,
like both of us were there, weren't we, when we
Yeah.
went from UN to NATO?
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a comedy. That do you know I was Kazivat from Boz?
No.
Oh yeah, it's a real dramatic story. I had in the run up, like the pre-deployment training, I had a pain in my groin area, and back then, I say back then I knew nothing. I don't know anything now. I wanted to go and I just ignored this pain, and it was getting increasingly worse. And so halfway through the tour, this pain in my groin came a lump, and the troopy at the time was like, "I know it's not doing much fizz," and I was like, "Oh, I've got this really weird pain in my groin, and I've got this lump." He said, "We'll go and see the med sergeant," and I can't name that med sergeant, but he's a real good bloke. He was hilarious. I went to see him and I was like, "Look, I've got this lump on my groin. It's doing me head in." And he looked at it and he went, "Oh, that's a hernia. And not only is that a hernia, that's the biggest hernia I've seen in my life. And if that explodes, you die. We need to get you out of here now."
Fucking hell.
I was like, "So when you get out of here?" And like by the afternoon, I was in the vehicle driving all the way down to where did we Split? Yeah. So yeah, we drove all the way down there, and I went to see a doctor there, and he was like, "Right, let me have a look." And you can read a face like a book. I was like, "Yeah, it's quite a big one, isn't it?" He was like, "How long you had this?" And I said, "Yeah, a long time." So he said, "Look, it's first operational theatre in a real long time. There's a whole load of medics here. We wouldn't mind them coming in to have a look at this. We're doing it to as many soldiers as possible so they can get some experience seeing things that might be wrong. Would you mind if they came in and had a look at this?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." And it's in a embarrassing area, isn't it? But I was like, if I'm going to have something done here, there's no point being shy. And so he said, "Look, I'll go and get them all. When I come in, you can prepare yourself and then show him." Like, "Yeah, right." So wheeled in about 15 medics from like privates all the way up to full screw and male and female, like cleaners, whistles. And he said, "So this is, what was it then? Was that Lance Jack? Yeah. Whoever. This is Cutter. He's got a bit of a hernia, one that needs immediate attention. Haven't seen anything like it, so if you could show us now." And I was just, yeah, sure. So I dropped everything, dropped my kecks, naked, pulled my shirt up. And he says, "Do have some decorum." So I covered up. So they were all looking at this freaky thing sticking out of my groin. And they left and he said, "Look, you got a choice. Fly back to the UK, you can have that sorted out. Or," so there's just round the corner, there's a German field hospital. And it's the first time Germans have deployed,
Yeah.
and they were unarmed though. He said since the war, big PR stunt. Do you want to? You can have it done there, and then fly back to the UK for 2 weeks off, and then come back. I was like, "Yeah, I was brought up in Germany. I trust them. They know what they're doing. I'll go to the Germans." So, sure, yeah, cool. So I went to this German field hospital, and had a hernia. My German was a bit ropey, but I could get by. And the surgery didn't go particularly well. It was like a mobile hospital type thing, like it was all like flat pack off the back of lorries, and so they're like, "Right, there's a surgery. Go into the surgery." When I woke up, I was in a load of pain, but I didn't. I was like, I'd never had surgery before, so I didn't know if it was right or if it was wrong. And yeah, I was in bits. I was in an awful lot of pain, and I put my hand under my bed sheets, and I thought I'd pissed the bed. So I didn't say anything. I kept my hand under there, and they come out and said, "You're all right?" And I was like, "No, I'm in a lot of pain." "All right, it's just the anaesthetic wearing off." When I pulled my arm out, my hand was covered in blood, and his face was like, "Oh no!" And he started shouting, "Achtung, Achtung!" And I lifted the bed sheet up, and I was lying in a massive bed of blood. I was rushed back into surgery. They'd cut a vein open inside me when they were doing my surgery.
It was nice.
Yeah, they forgot to sew it up. So I was rushed back in to have some surgery. And when I came out, because it was an internal bleed basically, I had like from my chest all the way down to my knees and around my back, like bruising. And the Germans do have a sense of humour. They called me the Smurf because I was in bits. but they were great. Like they were really they were a really good like bunch of lads who looked after us. Met a few Brit soldiers in there. Some of them had some real horrific injuries. There was a guy, like he was the father of a local politician. He was in there. He'd had his leg amputated, so there was a right mixed bunch in there with all sorts of weird ailments and injuries. And then, oh, I've got to tell you this bit. It's disgusting, but I'll tell you. After my surgery, I was all wired up to loads of different stuff, and they're like, "Look, we need to know your bowels are working properly, especially as you've had the second surgery. We need you to have a pee." No, I don't care. Like, I cannot lie in a bed and have a pee. I just can't. And they'll give me one of these pee bottle things. And my bladder was just getting massive, and I was in a load of pain with it. But I couldn't. And I was like, "Look, just let me get up and go to the toilet." I said, "No, you can't do it." And I was like, "Right, what happens if I don't pee? We'll give you a catheter." I was like, "What's that?" And he went and got this big tube. And I was like, "How does that make me pee?" And he went, "Shove it down you." I'm like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I swear down, man, I was like, once I saw that, I was like in this bed, like, and it wouldn't go. And he said, "Look, we're going to have to give you a catheter." And just like when I first saw the Brits, he was like, "Look, we need the medics to see this happening." And I'm like, "You're joking me, aren't you?" So I had a big group of them around my bed, pull me kecks down, and like, we're going to put this tube up his jappy, and he's going to have a pee in front of everybody. And I'm like, that's not a great situation to be in, is it? And so it turns out my bladder was really, really full. They only had 2 bags. I filled 5. 5 of these bags. But it was, when you hold one in for ages and you go for a wee, you make a really strange noise. It was like that. It was brilliant. So then the next day they said, "Out of interest, have you had a number 2?" I was like, "No." I was like, "So what do you do if I haven't?" They're like, "Oh, we force it." Well, what do you mean? He showed me this thing. We put that up your back door. So I was like, that is not happening. And round about 2 o'clock in the morning, it was at its quietest point. I got myself out of bed with all these things around me and dragged myself to the toilet and had a massive, it's disgusting, I know, but I had a massive compo turd.
Yeah.
It was gigantic. And I left it and I shouted for help. And it was the nurse on duty who came running to me. And, "What's the matter?" And I went, "I just need to prove I've been to the toilet. Have a look at that." I was like, "I'm good to go." So ended up getting
that.
I was well
proud of it. Yeah,
look at that. It's like, so yeah, I got sent home for some recovery, and I didn't think I was going to go back for Christmas. So what I did, as being a decent lad, is for all the lads who were on my crew, I put together like a Christmas present box for each of them, like sweets, magazines, and all that, and I sent them all out there and Christmas cards. Ha 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 ha. I'm going to be at home for Christmas and all that, and so I posted them all off, and then I had to go down to Aldershot to see the doctor who checked me out when I arrived back from the German field hospital, and I knew something wrong. He was in full rig, and his kit was there, and he was like, "Well, if I'm going back, you're going back, mate." And I arrived back in Sarajevo Christmas Eve. And not only did I arrive at Christmas Eve, I had all the mailboxes that had all their presents in them that said, "I'm going to have a great Christmas at home." So they all had something to open on now. So it's like, so they were opening them, and it was like, did you know you were coming back? It's like, no, I didn't. I thought I was going to be at home for Christmas. So, and then that's when we went through that fiasco of wiping, because there was snow on the ground. We had to wipe the vehicles down and quickly paint them camouflage before the snow landed on them. We went from UN to NATO, and that was great. All that time is UN.
Just to interrupt you, something. You just reminded me of something. You talked about painting the vehicles. So we ended up with a load of 432s for armoured ambulances, and they'd come to us green and black. So we had to paint them white, and then later on we had to paint them green and black again. The paint they give us, we were like, "Gosh, this is fucking thick paint, this." And we hand paint on, we were brushing it, right? The paint they'd give us was like road marking paint, fluorescent. So, like, anyone's trying to torch on the fourth rate, it just glue. Just like bright as hell. They're like, fucking hell. Yeah,
I
sorry.
couldn't believe that. That's like, I was like, is that really? I thought we were going to drive off somewhere and they'll get painted. Then is that really what they want us to do? Like with our hands, like brush the snow off with a cloth, dry it to try and get some paint on it. They looked horrific. But yeah, all the time that we were UN, man, we were getting messed around by whatever warring faction because it was all of them were doing crap stuff. Then we were told like that, you know, when you change to NATO, you can defend yourself or shoot back if necessary. And there was this one particular moment that was really satisfying. I'm going to tell the story. I don't know if I should or not. I'll tell it, and if you think it's not right, you can cut it out. I asked you earlier, like you were up on Igman, did you do a fire mission? So the old fort in Sarajevo, you look down the hill, and there was a tunnel. It went to the capital somewhere. In that tunnel was an 81mm mortar, and so we were mortar locators. They would reel out the mortar. We'd watch them do it. They'd fire the mortar into the city. We didn't need to use the technology to record it. We knew where it was. And the process was you'd report that to the UN. They'd send out some observers. By which time they've cleaned the mortar and they put it back in. The observer turns up and they're like, "No, we haven't fired it." And they said, "Well, they've seen you fire it from up there." And it was continuous, and that that round would just indiscriminately land in the city somewhere, and some person would be like, "It's your fault that happened." So when the UN observers would drive off, those troops would come out of the thing and put their fingers up at us, like, no. And I think they were a special unit called the Black Swans.
Yeah.
What they didn't know is that our capability was to get a grid reference down the tube. It was that accurate, and we did have like that data was sent to the guns up on Igman, and when we switched, we were able to like take preventative measures to stop them from firing. And so we were like, our stagging point was actually meant to be in the back of the 432 looking at a poxy little screen. Our stagging point now is going to be just looking down there until they wheel that out. And when they wheel it out, we could put a fire mission down on it. And like, so the guns had that data sort of, I was told, like preset on one of the guns.
Yeah.
And it was that quick. As soon as we seen it, we'd shout up, and then our number one would put in a fire mission battery or fire mission one gun or something on that mortar, and it didn't fire it again, and because we didn't send any observers to prove that that was quite satisfying, and that was probably the last action that we had. I say action, I don't mean like action, like the last thing we did before we packed up and left Sarajevo. We went up north. I can't remember the name. It's Sansky Most, I think it was called.
Yeah.
It was either the
Sansky
Orange.
Most, yeah.
I think it's called the Orange Factory. So we were one of the first there. From there, our role changed. We sort of deployed out onto sort of the front as to be observers to observe the Dayton Peace Accord, which was like a slow sort of retreat from the front line. So like 2 432s, two crews going out into the middle of nowhere just to observe this sort of the peace talk type thing, and that's when like our kit, our clothing, equipment was just, we're in rag order, man.
Everyone was.
Yeah, like really, really scruffy. And back then I used to have hair, so it looked like I had dreadlocks. But then when NATO troops started coming in, that's when they were called the Bullshit Brigade. And we were warned, like, look, because it was the Brits were coming, the Americans were coming, and they were coming in force. We were just warned, like, look, there's a different way of doing things. So I was like, I didn't really get it. Well, our 432 broke. It wasn't me this time. So I was told to go back to the Orange Factory. It was the Orange Factory in Sansky Most.
Sure it was, yeah.
We'd left the vehicle back there. We're just trying to get some parts off it. And when I went back there, there was a new, I don't know, regiment or whatever, being briefed by Freddie Viggers. And and it was the NATO troops. And Freddie stopped his briefing because he saw me, and I was on somebody else's camp. You know, we were there, we moved out, but we left some spares there, so it wasn't our camp anymore. And yeah, we had a bit of a catch up, asking how things and all this sort of stuff. And I was away, like he stopped his briefing. It was really awkward, by the way. So he came over and we just had a normal sort of catch up type thing. He said, "Look, is there anything I can do to help you?" And I went, "Yeah, there is one thing. So we're getting rumours of when we're going back, whether we go back early or there's an extension or something like that. Do you have any idea?" And he went, "Yeah, come here." And he had a briefcase, you know, essential piece of equipment in any armed conflict, a briefcase. And he opened it up, and on the top was our flight details. He said, "There, it's there." I was like, "Oh, cool." I said, "Anyway, look, I'm going to have to shoot off. Nice to see you again, Freddie," and walked off. And I don't know what regiment it was, but one of the battery sergeant majors or their RSM or something was like, I was scruffy as heck, man. So he walked off with me and just shouted, "Oi, you." I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "Do you know who that is?" I was like, "Yeah, that'll be Freddie Vigor's real close family friend." Like, he was like, puzzled. "And who the fuck are you?" I was like, "Bomb cutter, radar troop, just trying to get some spares off that." "Well, get off my camp then." I just, sorry, really haven't got time for this. So I got it. On the way back, I got a speeding ticket. I couldn't believe it. So I wasn't driving. I could only drive 432s then. Like tracks. I couldn't drive. But so the lad who was driving, and then it was really weird. It was an RMP, came up and blew lights on. I was like, just move over a bit, because we're in those, they're V8 Land Rovers, right? We were hightailing it. We'd spent quite a bit of time in Sarajevo where you don't drive slowly. And if the lights came and I said, just move over a bit so he can get past. And as he came up, he waved us to move over. I was like, he wants us to pull over. So we pulled up, and he came up to my window. He says, "You're the driver of this vehicle." And there's no steering wheel there. I was like, "No." He is. He's on the driver's side. Started asking us questions like a beat cop. "Do you know what speed you were going?" "Yeah, freaking quick." We're in a kind of rush. Name, rank, and number. And I'm like, "What's this for?" He says, "Now NATO here, there's speed limits." I was like, "Really?" Yeah. You got a speeding ticket. In a couple of weeks, whoever your troopy is, they're gonna. So I went, what was his name? Thornhill, Captain Thornhill.
Yeah.
That was him. He was X39. So I got a speeding ticket. He's like, "Shut up." Okay. I got a speeding ticket. And about a week later, he came in. "Yeah, you're right. You did get a speeding ticket. I got told off for that. Don't do it again." So shortly after that, we got our flight details and we flew back. And that was quite a weird thing as well. It was get your stuff together, hand it up, and go and wait in this field. And 2 Chinooks came over the horizon. The sound of a Chinook to this day is the most welcoming sound in the army. And whilst we're waiting, there's a little bit of snow on the floor, like sort of thawing out. I started kicking the ground, and there's a dead pig under my feet. I thought it was a human. So yeah, we literally jump on these helicopters, we fly back to Split, and it's not until you're around other people like you realise just how hanging you are. And
well, that was like us when we come down to see you. We'd been up on the hill,
minging.
living in shit.
Oh yeah.
And we'd come down and walked into your building, and we were just like, "Oh,
clip with them,
get away, stink." I was like, "Oh, do we?"
Yeah, it's minging. So we would like swap clothes, like when we're up Sansky Mouse and that. You know, we would have the best shower that we could. We're in some old fire brigade building or something. And just changing into dirty clothes was like, oh, it's clean clothes. Yeah. It was absolutely minging. Then we went back to, I went back to the UK and back to the regiment, and it was when I got back there. It wasn't long after where I started having thoughts of leaving. I came back at the worst possible time. It was a CO's inspection, and I think that lasts about a month. And it starts off like checking your block, like block jobs, and then it ramps up all the way to BSM's inspection, and the RSM would inspect, and then all the way from your rooms. You know what it is. I don't know why I'm trying to explain it to you, because you know. And yeah, I had a really hard time adjusting back to normal sort of camp life, and camp life is dull anyway. But when it's a CO's inspection, and I was having issues of, I had a poxy little room, and I didn't have anything in it. So like for milk, if I had a brew kit, it was on the windowsill. So the milk I'd leave on the windowsill, and I was told put the milk away or bin it. I'm like, no, that's my fridge, and it's my fridge because that's the colder place in the room. Take that poster down, and I just like, this is ridiculous, man. I've been told to take a poster down because someone's going to inspect. Whereas if you were a married gunner, I didn't go around your house and say I don't like your carpet. So I went back at a really, really bad time. Saw really what sort of war looked like. I had a lot more experiences than what I've spoken about. Some of them were like pretty bad. To then come back to that, I was just becoming like really, really annoyed. I was struggling with the sort of leadership or management, or it's like the army, the army's really sort of like top-down management style, isn't it? Do as you're told and all that kind of thing. And I was struggling with it, and it got so bad.
The bullshit.
Yeah, that's what it was. The bullshit, and right at a time when the bullshit was a CO's inspection.
Yeah,
there's a little bit of mud on there. I'm like, I ain't gonna flying fuck about the mud on there, mate. So I was at an age 25 where I had a decision. I could get out and probably, if it didn't work, get back in again. I had to think that way because I was never a civvy. I was at boarding school at a young age. I knew nothing about Civvy Street, and I look back, 25, still young, had no idea. And so that was what I was thinking. Could I get out, and if it doesn't work, come back in. Back then, it's resettlement courses, wasn't it? Because I was a realist. I had a look through the resettlement list and, bodyguards course. I'll be a bodyguard. and I said to myself, I'll do anything, but I won't do security. And I said, if I end up getting a security job, I've failed, and I'll get back in the army. And so I got out, and actually I did that bodyguards course. One of the guys who passed it, he was a really good lad. He's like ex-para. He went off to do some security work over some Arabic country, and we ended up meeting. He came back, and I was like, "What's it like?" He said, "Crap. This is pre-Iraq and that, He said, "I was just stagging on around this person's house." I said, "Oh, what are you doing now?" And he ended up doing quite an interesting job. Like, said, like insurance fraud.
Yeah.
He'd go out and like take photos of people lifting up bricks and builders who were on the sick and that.
Yeah.
So I ended up. When I left, ended up doing security work, but it was all right. It was corporate security in a merchant bank. Did it for about 2 years, if that, but long enough to go. Actually, I need to go back to college. So I went to college. Back then, Windows was new, so I went and learned like Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. And I kind of did all right for a little bit. I did struggle when I got out. I sort of hit the drink. I put on loads of weight, but so yeah, that was my. There's loads more of what I've done was in the army, and only in a short time. So I was in 1990, and I left 1997. And if you think about that, it's quite a busy time. Within it, there are loads of stories, individual stories, some of which sort of come back and bite you in the arse a little bit.
Some of them we probably can't talk about on podcasts.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed my time. It was a good crack. Made some really good friends, most of which I've not spoken to in 25 years, Frank?
Yeah, 25 years.
But the beauty is, it doesn't matter. We all have something in common. If I haven't spoken to you in 20 odd years, but when I walked through the door, it was just like, oh, there's Frankie.
Yeah.
Right.
The amount of times I say this to people, especially like civvy people who work with and all that, is that you can't explain it.
No.
It is.
No, you can't explain. And it's that
for all. I mean, I'm stuttering, I'm fumbling my words here at the moment because I can't really put it into words what it's like.
Yeah, it's hard to
you walking through that door then was like walking through the hangar door in Topcliffe.
Yeah.
Or walking at the NAFI or whatever. It's just all them years
never away.
Yeah, them years have gone, disappeared.
And the way that I sort of think about it nowadays is like, let's say, so many times in my life since leaving the army, I've had a friend who I might have been working with, like in an office or whatever, and then you'll go, oh, should we go out for a meal as a couple? And it's the first time you're meeting their other half or something. It's really awkward to start that conversation because you will not have anything in common.
No.
And you, and it could be something cheesy. Not in my case because I hate it, but like, what football team do you support? You're fishing for
Yeah.
something that you have in common. But we have something in common from the get-go that we don't have to find that. And then you catch up with what did he do? What did he do? And in most cases, it's bloody tragic, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, we have all that thing in common. And I guess another main reason why I left the army, just to finish up on your questions there, is something that we've said here, and somebody has said on another podcast about when the army does things good, it's good, and when it's bad, it's bad. And they did, I think, something that I thought was not only bad, but it really put my nose out of joint. And that was I was on a good gun. Taff Laffy was my gun number one. Rig was my cover number. I was driver stroke loader at the back, ammunition fella. Don't even have a job. Good drills. Stevie B was on the gun, and a lad called Jimmy Fern. And we were a good gun. I think we're a bit cheeky though. I think we may have upset somebody higher up because we ended up getting split up. Like Taff kept his gun. I think Sai got moved over to cover on another different gun. Jimmy Fern got put in the sergeant's mess. Stevie B got put in the officer's mess, and they put me in fucking RP staff. So that's a fact that happened. For some reason, we upset some people for being what I think we were a good gun. And the army's mentality is we need to break them up.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, "Can you lot stop being stupid?" they decided to split us up, and that impacted everybody. That had a big impact on me. If you remember, I had quite long hair. I was a little bit anti. It was at a time where I was a little bit cheesed off with the army, and they put me in RP staff, to work in the guard room with a white belt and a friggin' number 2 hat to like beast prisoners to the cookhouse and back and tell people to get off the grass. In fact, I did the opposite. I used to shout at people, "Get on the grass," and I would deliberately slow march prisoners to the cookhouse. And then somebody like Steve, who was a brilliant soldier, being put in the officer's mess.
Yeah.
And Jimmy, who was all right, so they put him in the sergeant's mess. So that mentality mixed in with, there was a little bit of tour envy as well. I came back from Bosnia and sort of rejoined the battery. There's a lot of people sort of just because you've been out there type thing. So that all just sort of stacked up to feeling somewhat surprised by some of the mentality of the sort of management. I'm saying management because I'm a civvy now, aren't I? That's not to say they ain't good people. They're all good people.
Yeah.
But the mindset and the thinking pushed me to a point where I'm like, I think I need to go here, because
I mean, the other thing is you've been out on a tour that's been, excuse me. I've heard people call it kinetic nowadays when you hear people talk. No, it was a very kinetic tour.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And that's a new word. It was a tour that wasn't easy.
No.
There was lots of shit happened. Lots of shit you'll probably never talk about. But you think about a lot.
Yeah.
And then you're coming back into bullshit city.
Yeah.
And just thinking, fucking hell, what's the point of that? Why am I doing that? That's not what. When we go out, we're not. It doesn't matter how clean the gun is.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how clean that vehicle is. But.
Or how long my hair is.
Yeah, well, to a certain extent. I've got no hair. We've both got no hair now anyway. So, but it's coming from an environment where you were doing your job, and all the shit that was going around it, and then you've come back into camp life, and it's.
Yeah. The place as well. It's like Topcliffe wasn't great, was it?
I didn't mind Topcliffe. I mean, I was married. It was different, I mean, I didn't mind Topcliffe at all. Lots of beer drank there. Lots of beer drank everywhere.
So they were the main reasons for leaving. Looking back on reflection, I think somebody else has already said as well, is that when we look back at our time in the army, we only think about the good points and the good crack, of which there are many. But there are definitely some bad sides. I have some stories that I could tell you that aren't great stories. But there's no point dwelling on those stories.
Well,
You know.
I mean, sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't. I mean, there's not. Again, with these podcasts, it's not just like my mates, your mates listening to them. There's people who aren't in the forces that don't understand.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and to see both sides of that can be a good thing. It's an introduction to that, almost. But if everyone just thinks the army's just all, you know, good times, and you know, and it is. There's a lot of it is good times, but there's lots of shit times as well. And it just standing on the garages,
shit,
with nothing to do. You know, sleeping, you know, pushing a broom around.
Yeah.
You know, how many times have you been in the garages and just thinking, what the fuck am I doing here? Or 5 minutes before parade. I mean, I remember in Topcliffe, right, that it got that bad the 5 minutes before parade.
It's 2:15.
People were turning up at fucking 7:30.
Yeah.
I walked in.
We were bad for that.
I walked in there one day, right? I thought I'm going to make a point of this. I walked in at 10 to 8, and I got 3 extras for being late.
Yeah,
I said it's not 8 o'clock yet.
Have a word with yourself, mate. That's disgusting behaviour.
But it's just fucking, you know, they'd been on parade, name roll call done, and they were all starting to go to work. And I said, it's not even 10 to 8.
Yeah, I rocked up at 2 minutes to, and they had already started the parade because I fell asleep on my pit, and I had my nose pierced, and I'd forgot to take the fucker out. And I
bet that went down well.
I walked up and said, "The fuck is in your face?" And it was at that point I remembered I'd pierced my nose, and still had it in. So yeah, I was putting it in lunchtime breaks and stuff. So yeah, they were my reasons to leave. They weren't, you know, big enough to be leaving bitter in any way.
Yeah.
I didn't leave.
How did you find the resettlement bit? Did you? I was going to say, did you think it helped?
No, mostly because like I'd been institutionalized from the age of 5 going to boarding school. I knew nothing. To put that into context, I only just passed my my driving test just before I left. I was lucky that I say lucky. So they clocked that I could only drive tracked vehicles. They're like, which mean you can't drive a vehicle like a car. I was like, yeah. So they pushed me through that, and I really appreciated that. It was a lad called Splash Fountain, was my driver instructor.
He's out in Australia now, I think. Splash.
Is he?
Yeah.
There should be a massive reunion or something. But when I left, I had my driving license and I bought a car. And I had to pay insurance. I can't explain to you how little I knew about the normal world. I can. I'm about to. So I got my car insured, and then a year later, I got a phone call from the insurer saying, "Just let you know, your new premium is this amount." And I was like, "For what?" "For your insurance." "Oh, no, it's all right. I've got it. I've got insurance. Thank you." Yeah, you're one of our customers. We're giving you your annual renewal price." "You what? I've got to do this every year?" I was gutted. I was like, so that'll give you an idea of what left the army. Right? I didn't know that insurance was a yearly thing. So yeah, I left the army quite naive, to say the least. So yeah, that's my time in the army. When I reached out to you, I said like, look, I wouldn't mind doing a 2-parter because. Yeah, I did 7 years, 6-7 years in the army. I've been out of it much longer.
Yeah.
That's obvious, isn't it? But I have, of late, I think, quite an interesting story to almost catch up. There's a small number of people out there, I think, that will know me. Might be curious to know what I've been up to for the last insert number of years.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. Well, it's not weird. It is weird that we all want to know how people got on, how they fared after the army. And we will do a part 2. We'll bring that one full circle. So we'll end this podcast now, and then we'll go on to part 2 at a later date.
Yeah. I want to say, Frankie, before we go into part 2, like, fair play for doing this, mate. When I first saw that you were doing it, I was like, if I can support that by doing something that I'm not 100% comfortable coming out. But like, I do recognize when somebody is doing something for a particular reason that they need some help, and I've enjoyed, I think there's 7 or 8 I've listened to now. Might be 7. I listened to one on the way over, and so, you know, I'm here to support that.
Thank you.
I don't particularly care about my story, but you know, to support you doing something that I've really, really enjoyed. That's why I'm here. So
it's been really, really good. Like you said, it's the feedback I'm getting off people is I've listened to your podcast and I've remembered things, you know, and it's
brought,
you know, it's brought good memories back for people. It's brought bad memories back for people. And I've got people who aren't connected to the forces or connected to me who have listened to them and have just said it's nice to see. Not, how can I put it? Right. So a lot of the podcasts that are out there are all very alley. They're all SAS, paras, Marines, you know, and good on them. Some of them are great podcasts, you know. But people have told me it's good to hear the other side, the normal soldiers, you know, who've got just as interesting stories to tell.
You know, average Joes.
Yeah.
Because there's so much, isn't there? It's unreal. So I wish you all the luck with it, and if I can do to support it, like I say, that I'm here. I like the sound of my own voice, so I think we should do a second one.
We will. Right, I'll say goodbye for now. Right. Enjoyed it. Next week will be part 2 of Mark's story, where he tells us what it was like after he left the army and what he got up to. It's an interesting and quite emotional story in some places, so tune in and listen to that. Thanks very much. Bye-bye now.